Hey, what if the climate crisis is being used to herd humanity into control systems and away from real solutions? Today, we are joined by someone who has spent decades challenging conventional thinking, not just about food, but about the deeper systems shaping our lives. Dr. Will Tuttle is a best-selling author, an educator, an internationally recognized speaker whose work inspires people to live with greater compassion, freedom, and awareness. And welcome, Will. It's great to have you today.
Thank you, Jeff. I am delighted to be with you. Thanks, everyone, for joining us. And I'm so glad that we can talk about this subject of quote unquote climate change. And I like how you began the whole event we're having, because it really, I think, has been used and is continuing to be used as a hammer in many ways to push us in a certain direction that may not be in our best interest. And I think a lot of our
I'm sorry to jump in. I just wanted to kind of finish introducing you before we even get into this point, because most people know you from the World Peace Diet. And that's just a huge book that's been around forever. But your latest book here, Food for Freedom, this goes further and it exposes, hidden forces that you believe and I believe are steering public perception and policy. And I think that you make a very compelling case. And in the final section of your book, you take on one of today's most, unquestioned narratives, the mainstream story, as we're starting to talk about, of climate change. And I think, as we're going to see, you argue that a lot of the science has been politicized, that the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, has shaped public understanding in ways that don't, match the evidence, and that CO₂, rather than being this dangerous pollutant that we're told, has been used as a kind of scare symbol to justify massive spending, control policies, and, basically the restructuring of human society. And, you connect this, as we're going to see, to the broader agendas that we've heard about, these, 15-minute cities and other programs that risk turning humanity into like a managed herd, something that vegans who already resist reducing living beings to property, can recognize as a pattern, and as a pattern to be resisted. And I love how you insist that advocacy for a plant-based world should never rely on deception or fear, but only on truth, on integrity, and genuine compassion. So I'm looking forward to this presentation.
Thank you. That's a fantastic summary, really, I have to say, of the basic points that we have to be aware of today. And as vegans, or people who are interested in compassion for animals and animal liberation, we have, I think, a very important mission, which is to promote truth and to take away the deceptions that all the animals are treated well and so forth, and that we need to eat animal protein to be healthy and so forth. But the idea is to get to the underlying truths of things. And one of the main points I want to make here at the very beginning is that animal agriculture is devastating to ecosystems. And by questioning climate change, I'm definitely not questioning that. A lot of people, though, I see have this whole mantra of go vegan for the climate, go vegan for the climate. And it's not in the best interest of our movement to use something that's not true as a motivation for people who are waking up and realizing that this whole climate narrative in many ways is a hoax. It's being used in ways that are not in our best interest. And so now the vegan movement is dropping. I've really seen it. I've been a vegan now for 45 years, and veganism has gone from being something with a very high level of respect. Basically, people didn't like veganism, but they respected vegans for compassion for animals, for truth, and so forth. And now we see the invasion of really junk food into the vegan movement by big money and junk campaigns, really, in many ways, that are not in the best interest of veganism and are going to be turning people against our movement. And I see this happening in our movement. And also, for me, it's quite personal in the sense that even right now, like today, I'm putting on events in cities. And people are saying, don't go to Will Tuttle's events. He does not believe in climate change. They're actually saying that right now. He doesn't believe in climate change. Like it's a faith-based religion that you have to believe. If it's like you don't believe in the divinity of Christ or the papal infallibility or something, you're a heretic and you have to be thrown out from the tribe, this kind of a thing. And I think it's so interesting because the people who are saying this, have they spent the hundreds of hours or thousands of hours that actually I've spent, studying this whole thing? Probably not. But the
it's
evidence,
also sort of implies like, don't expose yourself to other ideas, la, 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 la. No. He's talking about this. It's like, what? Vegans are supposed to have, of all people, kind of look under things and be suspicious and be curious and kind of like, don't go there because you might hear something that damages you. I agree with your point very strongly, by the way, that this has nothing to do with, the ecological benefits of the vegan diet. Those are unquestioned, and that's not what we're talking about today. I mean, just first, like water protection. Factory farms generate massive amounts of manure and chemicals that contaminate rivers and lakes and groundwater with nitrates and phosphates and antibiotics and hormones. And a plant-based food, system greatly reduces water pollution. It protects aquatic life. It doesn't destroy habitat. So the animal agriculture is the leading driver of deforestation for grazing land and feed crops like soy and corn, and shifting to plant foods directly for humans frees up, vast tracts of land. It could for rewilding, for restoring biodiversity, for protecting endangered species. The soil health is another. Intensive livestock operations degrade topsoil through overgrazing and monoculture feed production, and growing diverse plant crops. It can improve soil, increase organic. There's dead zones in water. There's fertilizers and manure that run off that feed from feed crops, and factory farms create these oxygen depleted zones in oceans and in lakes. It kills the fish, the marine life. So cutting out livestock feed production dramatically reduces that. It protects wildlife. Fewer fences and barriers means more migration. That's a lower water footprint. So there's so many environmental reasons, and antibiotic resistance. There's so many things associated with that could be helped. But the one question is, global warming? Wait a sec.
It's so interesting because I remember back in 2018, at that point, I had already started questioning the climate change narrative. I started questioning it probably around 2009, 2010, 2011 with ClimateGate. And because I believed it in the beginning. I actually did. I was right on board when Al Gore came out with this whole thing, and An Inconvenient Truth, and all the vegans jumped on board too, because we tried to get Al Gore to figure out that it's not just petroleum, it's also animal agriculture. And I was in the thick of all that, writing articles and promoting the whole climate change thing. But when ClimateGate happened in 2009, and then again ClimateGate 2 in 2011, where in East Anglia University, these IPCC scientists, there was a whistleblower who exposed their emails, where they were emailing each other, admitting that they were making things up, that they were just trying to make the world think that this was happening. It wasn't really happening, but it would be good to reduce climate change. So it's okay. It's kind of the ends justify the means. And so it's okay to stretch things a little bit. And so I started doubting things then, and I started doing research at that point. So remember in 2018, I was on a lecture tour, giving lectures all over the United States, as I've been doing. I've actually given more lectures promoting vegan living than any human being in history. I've given over 4,000 lectures in all 50 states, over 50 countries, all over the world. That's been my life. And so this one lecture, I was there, and they said, "We want you to come and give a lecture on veganism and climate change." I remember telling Madeline, this is going to be interesting. But I did. I said, okay, sure, no problem. And I went and I gave this whole lecture, 45 minutes, an hour long, talking about just what you just said. I never used the word climate once. I talked about all the different ways that animal agriculture is attacking and destroying rainforests and oceans and soil and dead zones and the whole thing. And at the end, and then we had a Q&A, and the word climate never came up the entire time. And they loved it. They thanked me. They signed books. They went away happy. That's the thing. I mean, we don't need climate, for goodness sake. That's something nobody even knows what the heck it is. We have all these things that are obvious, clear cutting of forests and polluting the waters and the air and the air pollution, water pollution, soil erosion, species extinction, and rainforest destruction. Climate just is not even, it's something that, and it's the main way that corporations have used to destroy the environmental movement. Because you have these large corporations, they do not want to be held to account for polluting the water and polluting the air and killing people. So they say they've moved the narrative over to climate because they can't. Then they're not responsible. It's climate. It's your fault. You're driving too much. You're flying too much. And they own the media. They control the media. So anyway, this is the underlying thing we have to understand in the beginning, is that we have been deceived massively. And why are we so gullible? That's the thing I can't figure out. I mean, especially vegans. You would think we would, of all people, be questioned. We're used to questioning everything that the media says, that the pharmaceutical industry says, the chemical companies. We're questioning that all the time. But then the tribe says, don't question that. We are vegans and we believe whatever the liberal Democrats say, because we're liberal Democrats and they believe it. So that's what we do. And I was a liberal Democrat for years, but I realized, this all got hijacked. Everything got hijacked. And these movements, veganism is getting hijacked. So this is a really an important discussion to have, that we don't lose the heart and soul of our movement to these corporate forces that want to destroy our lives and the lives of animals and ecosystems and are tricking us. They're tricking us. We have to be savvy. That's one of the things I've always really respected about you, Jeff, is that you have been willing to just speak your truth, even when it wasn't popular. And that's something that's so important. And it's funny, about 6 months ago, this woman I've met, she's a vegan, and she has a Tuttle from somewhere in her background. And so we got into a lineage, and I noticed you're kind of a little bit into that. And I went back and I realized, I was born and raised in Concord, Massachusetts. My father would get on his Minuteman outfit every April 19th, and we'd celebrate the revolution and go down to the Old North Bridge and freedom of speech and these freedoms. But she showed me this resource that one of my ancestors, he was not a grandfather, he was an uncle, like way back in the 1750s during the tyranny of the British. They actually captured him, and he was spreading things they didn't want him to spread. And so they cut his tongue off. They literally cut his tongue off, so he wouldn't speak bad things they didn't like. And then they killed him. And then a few days later, they ended up killing him. But that's what tyranny does. Tyranny does not want us to speak up, to say what we actually think is true. And instead of physically doing that, nowadays it's basically banning us and censoring us and shadow banning us and all these things. And it was really bad. The dark days, like right now, if we tried to have this conversation in 2021, we couldn't put it on YouTube. It would be banned. We'd be no one could hear it. So we should be thankful that we can at least a little bit speak these things up. But if we don't protect our freedom of speech, we won't have it. And how are we going to defend animals and ecosystems if we can't speak and can't gather and can't do anything? So these are really critical issues.
I couldn't agree more. There was an article in the New York Times yesterday, I don't know if you saw it, about Martha's Vineyard has a proliferation of vegetarian restaurants because people are getting bitten by this tick there that causes allergic reactions to meat and dairy or something like that. So all these wealthy people, I guess this tick has just gone through the community, and you can look at it. All these people are becoming vegetarian or vegan. I don't want people to go vegetarian and vegan. I mean, I want them to go, but not because of a tick, not because of, they got sick or something that's hurting their health and forces them to do it. I want people to do what they want to do and have freedom to make choice. So it's like, I want people to go vegan, but not to save the planet, not to save the climate, because I don't think that's going to happen. And that's like a misdirection. Cow farts are not the problem. But maybe you want to talk about what the problem is.
Okay.
I know you got a little presentation here. Should we go jump into that?
Fantastic. Okay, let's do that. I'll just take people through. Thank you so much, Jeff. So yeah, this is just a brief slide presentation I'd like to share with you. And it's based on the World Peace Diet and on my new book, Food for Freedom. And so you can see this Food for Freedom, as Jeff mentioned, I have quite a bit in there toward the end about climate. And the whole idea is to try to understand the basic idea that as long as we imprison animals, we're going to find the same thing happening to us. If we're going to insist on taking away their freedom, we're going to lose our freedom. And this is very important now in the age of technology, where we have surveillance systems and these massive computerized AI-driven systems that can easily be used to dominate and exploit human beings the way we dominate and exploit cows, pigs, chickens, turkeys, ducks, geese, and other animals. So here we go. So this is the basic idea. So we have here the list of the animals killed by wildlife services. This is back in 2004, but it's millions of animals, thousands of all these wonderful different animals. And so we have to get an understanding that governmental agencies can be used with our taxpayer money to kill millions of animals that are just trying to live in nature. We have to be willing to question the underlying motives of governmental agencies, especially when they're taken over by corporate power. So this is the World Climate Declaration. There's many scientists. This is over almost 2,000. There's actually more than 2,000 now that have made the World Climate Declaration. And these are scientists that are saying there is no climate emergency. There's also this as well. This is the Global Warming Petition Project. 31,000 scientists have signed this. These are people that are all saying, no, there is no global warming or global climate change. So what I'm saying is not just some random crazy person saying something. There's many people that have understanding that the climate change narrative is a hoax. It's not based on any valid science, but they're not allowed to speak because what we have to understand is that we live in a plutocracy, right? Pluto is the Latin word that means wealth. So we live in a system where the wealthy control the government, they control media, they control education, they control the institutions, how we see the world. And so the main power that wealth has is the power to control narratives, to control what we're thinking. So if you can get people to think something, like, for example, like recently they had a thing in France where they floated the idea of everyone in France being willing to only fly two times in their entire life because of climate change. And everybody said, okay, not everybody, but like 80% of the people agreed to that. So that's the situation we're in, is that when our narratives are controlled, then we get controlled. So the next slide here, how do we move to the next slide? Yeah. Okay. So this shows the permanent gases of the atmosphere. So it's obvious that carbon dioxide is tiny. I mean, nitrogen is 78%, oxygen is about 21%, argon is almost 1%. So that's already 99% right there. And then you have carbon dioxide at 4/100ths of 1%, as well as these other trace gases. So carbon dioxide is tiny and it's critically important. So this is something else. I mean, look at this. This is what happens with more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. Carbon dioxide is our greatest friend. The idea that we should have climate have zero carbon is suicide. It's literal suicide. This is growing a pine tree at 385 parts per million, which is roughly what it is now, or it was 2 years ago when they did this. At 150%, look, the tree grows much bigger, 300% much bigger still, 450% at 835 parts per million. So greenhouse gas operators routinely put carbon dioxide into the greenhouse to grow their tomatoes and all their vegetables bigger and healthier and happier. So we have had climate change, we have had carbon dioxide levels increasing, but that's not a bad thing. That's a great thing. That's a fantastic thing. It allows us to feed more people, to have a more lush world. Everything that we see, like these trees that weigh thousands of pounds, where does that weight come from? The thousands of pounds. It comes from carbon dioxide. Through photosynthesis, they pull carbon out of the air, and that's the carbon that's in trees and vegetables and fruits and nuts and seeds. It all comes from the atmosphere. If we have if we don't have enough carbon dioxide, plants cannot grow and animals and humans starve. So stop with this idea that carbon dioxide we have to sequester it or some terrible thing like that. So this is really important. So this shows this is the data of the last 600 million years of carbon dioxide levels. So look at this. I mean, just be aware. Right now, we're down at about 400 parts per million, which is, if it gets down to 150 parts per million, that's the end of all life on Earth. That's the end of plants and animals. It's over. So we're not that far above that. So any idea that we should reduce carbon dioxide is suicidal. If you go back to the Jurassic, you can see very clearly it's almost 3,000 parts per million. The Triassic, 2,000 parts per million. So the levels that were much higher in earlier times, the Cambrian, the Precambrian. So it's very clear that where we are now is historically very low carbon dioxide levels. And also, this is really important because this shows clearly, so the blue line shows the carbon dioxide levels like we saw from before, how they were much higher, they go up and down, and now they're very low. Now look at the temperature. Basically, temperature goes up and down. Right now, the temperature is relatively low. We're only at about 16 or so degrees Celsius, or 17, maybe 15, somewhere in there, 15 degrees Celsius. And it's been much higher in the past, and life was happy and good. I mean, the Jurassic, all these, we can't say that the temperatures are too hot. And in fact, from a historic point of view, I'll talk about this later, the worst times for human beings have always been when it gets cold. That's when people die. That's when civilization completely collapses and people are living in caves and barely surviving, and there's starvation and famine because it's too cold to grow crops. So we should be thanking our lucky stars that we have as much warmth as we have, and we certainly don't want less. So we should go to the next one. And so this is, again, critically important. So this is carbon dioxide levels in the atmosphere on the left side. So from 0 to 100 parts per million, that's just a little bit of carbon dioxide. That has basically 71% of the impact. That's how much impact carbon dioxide has on the temperature. So as we go up here to like we're at now, the black area, 400 parts per million, we've basically already used up 88% of the impact that carbon dioxide has on climate, on the temperature. It doesn't, so if it goes up to 500, 600, 800, 1,000 parts per million, it's negligible. Whatever it contributes is negligible. It's nothing. So we're above the 100 parts per million. So carbon dioxide is negligible. Also, carbon dioxide is tiny in its impact in general anyway. As this next one shows, the greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, water vapor is the main greenhouse gas. I mean, this has been well understood for decades. Carbon dioxide is a fraction of water vapor. Water vapor typically takes up 1 to 2% of the atmosphere. And that is the real greenhouse gas. And you know it. I mean, I know it. We travel the world. We travel all over the United States, worldwide. If we're in a humid area, it gets hot during the day. It's humid at night. It's humid the next day. The heat stays. The heat's trapped. When we go to the deserts, there's very little humidity, and it gets cold at night, and it gets hot during the day because there's not enough water vapor to hold the heat in. Water vapor is what holds the heat, and that's the climate. That's the greenhouse gas, not carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide is minimal, and as you could see from the other graph, sometimes carbon dioxide is high, temperatures are low. Sometimes carbon dioxide is low and temperatures are high. I mean, it just varies in all kinds of ways. You can't say there's a direct causal effect in any way at all. This is another one to just see. So what are the natural sources of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere? So there's natural sources. Carbon dioxide is always being released into the atmosphere. There's what's called the carbon cycle. So the main way that carbon dioxide gets into the atmosphere is from the oceans. As it says here, the oceans act as a major source and sink of CO₂, releasing dissolved CO₂ into the atmosphere at the surface of the sea. And right now we are in the period of more volcanic activity under the surface of the ocean. We can't see it, but there's lava spewing into the oceans and heating up the oceans underneath. This has been happening for the last few years. And scientists don't understand that much. It's hard to see it, but we have more volcanic activity and more underwater volcanic activity. And so the oceans are heating up underneath, and that heating of the oceans is causing the carbon dioxide to increase. That's what's causing it to increase. That's one of the main reasons. Also respiration, like when all of us, when we're breathing, we're releasing carbon dioxide into the air, plants and animals. Decomposition, when anything decomposes, then carbon dioxide, bacteria break it down and into carbon dioxide. Volcanic eruptions release enormous amounts of carbon dioxide. Forest fires, of course, when trees burn, it releases carbon dioxide. Weathering of carbonate rocks. We have a lot of carbon in rocks, so when they weather, that releases carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. So we have to understand that there's a carbon cycle, and it's huge. It's much bigger than what we're being told. We're being lied to about this whole thing. This shows, for example, the level of carbon dioxide since 1958. And it's been going up from 320 to 420. Okay, so it's gone up that much. And then this shows all, like Rio is where we had the big Earth Summit, where they sounded the alarm then in the beginning of a little bit about global warming, climate change. And then we had our COP 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way up to. And what have these COPs done? They've done nothing. I mean, we humans, anything we do is not going to change this increase of carbon dioxide. When you have magma coming up in the bottom of the oceans and increasing carbon dioxide from the oceans, right? It's not. I mean, why aren't they talking about that? Why? Why is that like not being discussed? It's very interesting. This is another. This is from the Washington Post, just showing how the climate, our temperature is basically quite low. It's not high. We shouldn't be terrified of global warming, as we are being told. This is from the Time magazine back in 1977, How to Survive the Coming Ice Age, right? They were scaring us about that. Now in 2006, be very worried about the global warming and the melting of the glaciers, and everything's going to be underwater. We were told that. And back in 1989, officials says entire nations could be wiped off the face of the earth by rising sea levels if global warming trend is not reversed by the year 2000 is what he said. And I remember Al Gore in 2006 when he started his whole spiel, and he said that in 10 years, by 2016, there'll be no more glaciers in Glacier National Park, that Miami will be underwater, and there'll be no ice in the Arctic, and all these, nothing ever came true. And in fact, Al Gore and Obama have, in the meantime, have bought palatial mansions right on the water, right on the ocean. So they don't believe it. This is an article from the New York Times just recently. How the islands they've said were going to vanish have never vanished. In fact, islands are bigger than they've ever been. A lot of them are growing. So the IPCC is really the enemy of science because it's political. We have to understand that. The intergovernmental panel, right? It's governmental. It's not science. It's a panel that was given a mandate to prove and to demonstrate climate change. So they pay scientists to do their job to convince everybody that we have to be very afraid of climate changing, and so we have to be willing to give up our freedom to move. When you want to imprison cows and pigs and chickens and exploit them, what do? You take away their freedom to move. You put them into a cage. You put them inside a fence. Can't go anywhere. That's the logic that's being used, and you centralize power and control. It's being used for that as well. I mean, look at this. This is an IPCC. Oops, sorry. This is an IPCC meeting where they're deciding on science. They get together and they vote on what the science actually is. I mean, here's Richard Feynman, the famous scientist from Berkeley. No government has the right to decide the truth of scientific principles. But that's what's happening. The IPCC gets together and they vote and determine science. I mean, that is so flagrantly ridiculous. I don't see why people believe it. But we do, because we're told by the New York Times and CNN that we better believe, and by everybody in our little group that we better believe and don't question anything. 97% of scientists agree with whoever's funding them. I have a PhD from the University of California at Berkeley. I took courses in qualitative research methodologies, quantitative research methodologies. I studied science. Doctors never took that kind of training. They believe whatever the journals say. You should never believe what journals say, quite honestly, because the whole peer-reviewed system, everything, it's based on we agree, and we'll tell you that we agree, and then we can publish it, and we can make money, and we can get more grants, and who's giving the grants? The big petroleum industries, the chemical industries, the pharmaceutical industries, they're giving the grants through the U.S. government. Everything in science is beyond corrupt. It's so corrupt, you can't even imagine. So we have to just understand that. And it's not a bad thing. It's just understand this is the way it works. When you have money controlling science, money controlling governments, money controlling media, money controlling education, then we're brainwashed. We're all brainwashed. We have to understand that. And I'm not saying that I'm not brainwashed. We all have to realize we can be fooled. We are being fooled. We have to be so vigilant. Always vigilant, because there are powerful forces that are trying to control our minds so that we give up our sovereignty. And that is not a good idea for us, for our children, for animals, for anyone. We have to maintain our sovereignty. Okay, so now this is a perfect example. This is basically, everyone agrees. No one ever disagreed with this. We had the Little Ice Age back from the 16, 17, 1800s, and we're coming out of that in the 1900s, so it's warming up. It was a very hard time. That's when people came to the United States, tried to have a new life. There was starvation and hunger in Europe. Before that, there was a medieval warm period. It was a wonderful time. Everybody was, civil, the Renaissance, and there was a lot of cultural progress was happening because the temperature was warm. And so that's the truth. But look at this. This is what IPCC says. They lie. I mean, they just directly lie. They say this is for the last 1,000 years, it was basically flat, and now it's going up. This is called a hockey stick. These are hockey stick graphs that completely paint a lie, a deception, that it was they completely eliminate the medieval warm period and just try to get everybody to believe, to rewrite history, that it was always cold and now it's getting really hot. I mean, this is what the IPCC pays for, and they pay scientists, and gosh, you make a lot of money and you don't lose your job, because if you question it, you lose your job. This is what's happening. John Clauser, the great Nobel laureate, IPCC is one of the worst sources of dangerous misinformation. He's right. I mean, we have to understand that. This shows the graph of temperature over the last 3,000 years. And you can see there's warm periods and cooling periods, and it's during the warming periods that civilizations flourish, and it's during the cold periods that civilizations suffer and people starve. Global warming is largely a natural phenomenon. The world is wasting stupendous amounts of money on trying to fix something that cannot be fixed. So we have to understand these things. This shows the temperature over the last 10,000 years. And you can see it's very low, comparatively speaking, right now. It's been much warmer during the medieval warming period, during the Roman warming period, during the Minoan. These were when cultures really flourished, was when it was warmer. And so, again, we have to question everything about this. And then this is a similar one showing that it's been warmer in prior years. During recorded history, there was a warm period lasting from 250 BC to about 400 AD. This was appropriately named the Roman warm period. Some modern coastlines have been found 2 miles out from where they were. during the Roman invasion of Britain in 43 AD, showing that at that time sea levels were significantly higher than they are now. Arctic temperatures were at least 2 degrees higher at that time. Amazingly, at that time in history, the Western Arctic Ocean was covered in ice only 50% of the year. Now it is covered with ice each year. Oops, sorry, let me just finish that up. Let's see, sorry. Let's see here. During the ensuing period from 400 AD to 950 AD, known as the Dark Ages, it was colder. Then came the medieval warm period, extending from about 950 AD to 1250 AD. We have to really understand this. Ice core samples show that although the average temperature was about 2 degrees warmer during the medieval warm period, the carbon dioxide level was actually lower than it is now. This again demonstrates the lack of correlation between the percentage of carbon dioxide and the Earth's average temperature. Look at this. At that time, a colony of Vikings from Scandinavia raised vegetables in a part of Greenland now covered by a glacier. All right. So this is back 1,000 years ago. They were growing vegetables in the glaciers of what they called Greenland because it was green. Now it's icy. And you can't do it. And we're worried about global warming. How can we be lied to so successfully? It's just amazing to me, really, quite honestly. Okay, this shows, again, people are saying there's so many terrible droughts. Well, it shows there were much worse droughts in the past 100 years. This shows that floods have also decreased overall over the last, since the 1940. This shows climate-related deaths, for example, from 1920 for the last 100 years, and they've gone way down. We have this idea there's all these extreme, we're always told, it's all global climate change is causing all these extreme weather events. So we have to question these narratives. And this is an interesting one. This puts global warming in perspective. So this is basically the temperature in centigrade, roughly a little below 15 degrees. Now we're up maybe around 15 degrees centigrade is the global mean temperature. Okay, and it's gone up at 1.6 degrees Celsius in the last 200 years. That's not much. That's nothing. I mean, so look at this. So Oslo, the average mean temperature of Oslo is only 6 degrees. That's like about 46 degrees Fahrenheit. That's their mean temperature. Look at Singapore. It's it keeps moving. The average mean temperature in Singapore is 28 degrees. That's about 82 degrees. Madeline and I have been to both of these cities. There are vegans in these cities. We've given lectures promoting veganism in both of these cities. And the people are happy and well-adjusted and having a wonderful life in Oslo. And they're happy and having a wonderful life in Singapore. And, we're adaptable. We human beings, we can live. I mean, the global mean temperature, look at this. It's way down at 6 degrees or 28 degrees. We have to understand that we're being lied to about all these things. And this is something from the Vostok ice cores showing actually that carbon dioxide going up and down as over the last 150,000 years, it usually kind of follows. It's not causal. It's following the temperature. It comes afterward. Carbon dioxide comes afterward because when the oceans heat up, they release more carbon dioxide, for example. And this is another thing, back in January of 2022, there was this huge volcano that exploded under the water in the South Pacific Ocean and sent up like hundreds of thousands or millions of metric tons of water into the atmosphere. And scientists said back then in 2022, well, we've increased water vapor in the earth. That's in the atmosphere. That's the main climate warming power. So it's going to be warmer for a few years. But they never said that to the people. They didn't say, well, it's going to be warmer for a few years. They just bang the drum of alarmism. Oh, it's getting warmer. It's getting warmer. So we believe it. So this is well known. So we have to understand there's a political motive, which is actually economic. It's actually the huge, super wealthy bankers that run the politics, and the politics runs the science, and we go along and we believe whatever we're told, follow the science. Small Business Administration, this is important, has estimated that compliance with all the climate regulations, many of which are state regulations already in place, is already costing U.S. taxpayers over $1.75 trillion per year. This is what this climate regulations and system and science and everything is costing. Huge subsidies for wind, solar, and biofuel industries, administration propaganda campaigns, tax breaks for the affluent. These wasted trillions of dollars could have been spent on solving the Earth's real environmental problems, such as reforestation, recycling plastics, metals, and paper, removing pesticides, dioxin, and nitrates from our water supplies, reducing air pollution, and promoting organic agriculture. Yeah, we could have used one. Can you imagine what we could have done with $1.7 trillion a year to really clean up the environment and really have a great life? But no, we waste it. And look at this. This is really amazing. This is 1985. I did this research myself because I wanted to find out. And I made this pie chart. So in 1985, this is from the official statistics from the U.S. Department of Energy. Fossil fuels and nuclear made up 89% of the fuels that we used. Right? You can see natural gas is 30%, coal is 28%, petroleum 27%, nuclear 4%, hydroelectric 4%, biomass or wood 3%, geothermal wind 2%, and wind and solar at each 1%. That was what, 40 years ago. So then we spent untold trillions and trillions of dollars to promote wind and solar and green energy, renewables, right? So look at this. This is it today, 2024, from the same department. They've gone from 11% down to 8%. Renewables are down to 8%. It's less. I mean, how can we not be outraged? Look at this. Natural gas, 38%, 27% for oil, 10% for coal, 9% for liquid natural gas, propane, 8% for nuclear, wood or biomass, which is you're cutting down forests to burn them. It's a terrible thing. 2.5% biofuels, you're growing corn to turn it into ethanol. Terrible thing, really. 2.5%. Hydro down to 1%. Wind's down to 1%. Geo and solar they're still at 1%. They never went up. They never went up. And after trillions of dollars, it's still the same. That's why the people that say, oh, the oil companies don't like this. The oil companies love it. They make more money from how much petroleum it takes to get all these batteries. I mean, look at the batteries in an electric car weigh 500 kilograms. To make a car battery of this type, you need to process 10 tons of salt for the required lithium, 15 tons of ore for the required cobalt, 2 tons of ore to get enough nickel, and 12 tons of copper ore. I mean, and copper. I mean, and nickel. Some of the terrible human atrocities that are committed for lithium and cobalt and nickel, where people are dying in the mines all the time. It's terrible. In total, you have to process 200 tons of soil to make a single battery. It pollutes more than a petrol diesel car does in 20 years. So we have to realize that they're laughing all the way to the bank. I mean, these things are not, I mean, even if it was, I mean, we have solar panels on the roof. I love solar on the roof. I think it's great. We actually are in favor of that. And we have basically self-sufficient. We feed more energy into the grid than we take through our solar panels, and so that's great. But there's this centralization of wind and solar, for example, and ethanol. All these things, they're centralized, and now we have whole desert areas destroyed, olive vineyards destroyed to put in gigantic solar panel arrays. Birds are being killed by windmills. Whales and dolphins are being killed by these offshore windmills. I mean, it's environmentally and for animals and for wildlife, they're a disaster. They're terrible. So why are we championing these things when they cost so much money and it doesn't contribute hardly anything? We have to really understand. Okay, so let's go on a little bit more. This is basically wrapping it up here. The urban heat island effect. This is an important thing to just understand, because we keep getting this idea that it's getting hotter and hotter, but basically urban areas only make up 3 to 4% of the land, less than 2% of the planet, but 75% of the weather stations are in areas that are now urbanized. So if you go back 50 or 100 years ago, the weather stations were out in the country, and now it's urbanized. And so it's the illusion of it getting hotter. But when satellite data is used, you can see that it's not getting hotter, very little. So that's we have Anthony Guterres, the head of the United Nations, talking about global boiling, trying to scare everybody. We should just not be deceived by these things. We also have to understand that there are powerful forces at work that affect the climate, much more powerful than anything we can even imagine. The most important thing is the output of the sun. The output of the sun changes, and the hotter, when the sun puts out more heat, then it's hotter. And when it puts out less heat, then it's less hot. And we have no way of predicting or understanding these changes in the sun. There's also the Milankovitch cycles, which is basically the eccentricity of the Earth's orbit around the sun, which every 41,000 years creates cycles, a number of different cycles, the precision of the axes, various different cycles of climate. So we understand those, and they're huge. And then we also have to understand cosmic rays have a huge impact on our climate, and they decrease and increase. And as they do, they change cloud cover because they ionize the particles in the atmosphere to make more clouds or less clouds. And clouds are a major factor in climate because they reflect the heat from the sun. So we have to understand there are vast forces at work that we don't control. And also just remember that people have died from, look at this headline, death for millions in 1920 record heat wave. These things have been happening for a long time. There's been climate catastrophes. And so I'll just close now. This, again, Dr. John Clauser. The popular narrative about climate change reflects a dangerous corruption of science that threatens the world's economy and the well-being of billions of people. Misguided climate science has metastasized into massive shock journalistic pseudoscience. In turn, the pseudoscience has become a scapegoat for a wide variety of other unrelated ills. It has been promoted and extended by similarly misguided business marketing agents, politicians, journalists, government agencies, and environmentalists. In my opinion, there is no real climate crisis. And Dr. Richard Lindzen, distinguished professor of atmospheric science emeritus at MIT, deeply flawed logic, obscured by shrewd and unrelenting propaganda, actually enabled a coalition of powerful special interests to convince nearly everyone in the world that CO₂ from human industry was a dangerous, planet-destroying toxin. It will be remembered as the greatest mass delusion in the history of the world. The CO₂, the life of plants, was considered for a time to be a deadly poison. And again, Upton Sinclair, the hardest thing in the world is to try to get a man to understand something when his salary depends on him not understanding it. So I think, this is really the thing. Like this is a great video, The Climate, the Cold Truth, banned on YouTube. You can't, I don't know if it's back on, but back during the dark days of 2022, 2023, under the liberal Democrats, everything was banned. You couldn't even see this. You had to go on Rumble. This just came out in June. Richard Lindzen and William Happer, professor of emeritus these are extremely prestigious climate scientists who have now retired, so they're not worried about their salary. And you can read this online. Maybe we'll put a link later from the CO2coalition.org. But this is a great, easy to read, only maybe 20-page summary. Physics demonstrates that increasing greenhouse gases cannot cause dangerous warming, extreme weather, or any harm. So that's it. I'm going to stop there. I want to thank all of you for your kind attention and really reiterate, I guess, the main points here, which are that certainly we should be concerned about the impact of animal agriculture on our ecosystems. Like Jeff and I talked about earlier, it's a tremendous problem, but not climate. Leave climate out of it. Climate is being used as a way to imprison us. We have terrible legislation that's being drafted and would be supported by brainwashed people to take away the freedom to travel. The freedom to travel is a fundamental freedom. I mean, if you look at the 5 freedoms in the Bill of Rights, these are critical freedoms. Freedom of speech underlies everything. George Washington said, if we lose the freedom of speech, we will be led like dumb sheep to the slaughter. We have to have freedom of speech. And then freedom of the press, freedom of religion, and freedom of assembly, and so forth. These are critical. But there's 2 more. Freedom of bodily autonomy. There's nothing worse than not having bodily autonomy. Then you're a complete slave. They can put toxic chemicals right into your blood veins and kill you or maim you or take away your capacity. So that these freedoms have been under attack. They are under attack right now. The freedom of speech, all these other freedoms, the freedom of bodily autonomy, and the underlying freedom that was not talked about, like bodily autonomy was not talked about in the Constitution. They probably couldn't imagine that anyone would try to do such a thing. But freedom of travel. Freedom of travel is so important. That is it. If you take away freedom to travel from an animal, for example, that's the worst possible thing. We have a garden. We have a wonderful garden right here. We have 80 fruit and nut trees and vegetables and everything. When we first put our garden in 13 years ago, we put up a nylon fence to keep the deer out. The deer would come in and eat the trees. And so it worked. They never came in. It worked fine. But then one day, somehow a deer got through a gate and was inside our nylon fence. And she just smashed the nylon fence down. She destroyed the fence. And it really showed me that the worst possible thing you can ever do to a free living being is take away their freedom to move. You've taken away their entire life. What are they going to, it's the worst thing. But what do we do? By the millions, by the billions, we take animals, cows and pigs and chickens that live for millions of years freely living their lives, and we put them into a cage. That is something only slaves would do that. How can we even imagine? But as I say, we have to understand, as you sow, so shall you reap. If we're going to insist on taking away the freedom of movement of billions of animals every day and paying for it and eating their flesh of these tortured animals, we're going to lose our freedom of movement. And this is the mechanism, global climate change. You can't go anywhere now. 15-minute cities, you're not allowed to go anywhere beyond 15 minutes. And if you do, we'll take away your ability to spend any money, and we'll put you in a prison. So we're in a prison. We're being put into a prison. We have to understand that. It's nothing to be afraid of. It's just to see clearly that when you have a situation, as I discuss in Food for Freedom, where 1/10,000th of 1% of the human population, 8,000 people roughly, has so much wealth that they control the other 99.9999% of the human beings, but it's a very unstable situation. Those 99.999% of the people, they don't want to be exploited and oppressed by the 1/10,000th of 1%. So the only way that situation can remain is through violence, but it's done through mind control. It's not done through, they don't have enough people to do it physically. So it's done by just having us all believe that it has to be this way, that we have to work, show our resume and a job and believe in climate change and eat animal foods. And so as we enslave animals, we get enslaved. So liberation for humans is liberation for animals, and it means questioning the official narratives that destroy the freedom that we have as human beings. And it means essentially decentralizing. The main thing to understand is that the two things that there was a spokesman for the United Nations a couple of years ago laid it all out, and she said very clearly, "We own the science." She actually said that we own the science, and they employed thousands and thousands of people to censor during COVID, and she said we have to make sure that the two most important narratives are never questioned, and she said those are vaccines and climate change. That cannot be questioned. So the United Nations is put in place as a vehicle for the wealthy elite. And if you look at the 17 Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations, every single one of them has one trajectory, and that is to centralize power in the hands of technocrats, people that are unelected who will run the society. So we need to understand that the plutocrats who have so much wealth and are controlling the narratives that are in our own minds. It's called fifth generation warfare. And the beautiful thing is that we can understand that, and we can build societies of peace and freedom. We can decentralize our food production, our information, our energy more and more, and get more resilient. And so I want to thank Jeff so much for being a continual voice for questioning official narratives, for bringing us back to the basic, simple truths that we can thrive on organic, whole, plant-based foods, and that we can live a happy life together on this earth. And the key is questioning the official narratives and not buying the narratives that come through the mainstream media. I'm so glad, people say, how is it possible you haven't been to a doctor in 50 years or had one drug or aspirin or anything in 50 years? And I say, well, I've been a vegan, whole organic plant-based foods, and 50 years, I've never had a television, and that's the thing. We have to disconnect from the mainstream media sources and really come back to these kinds of discussions. So thank you very much.
Will, thank you so much for that presentation. It was great. And for sharing your time, your research, and your perspectives here today. And I would say that whether someone agrees or not with all of your points here, you've given us so much to think about, and just reminding people that it's how important it is to question and to dig deeper and to look at the evidence for ourselves. I especially appreciate how you connect these big picture ideas back to personal integrity, to living in a way that's aligned with compassion and truth, not fear and manipulation. I mean, there's so many things that, as you were saying, that my journey is kind of the same as yours. I was a believer. I was a promoter of, those positions, and over time and a series of kind of things made me question it to where now I don't personally really buy it at all. There's so many things, as you were talking, that I've seen talks and articles about the collection of data, mainly in the Northern Hemisphere, of temperature data, as you say, around cities primarily that grew. And so, of course, the temperature went up when there was a parking lot, blacktop paved, where for 100 years before that, it was a field or something. In so many ways that things can be, you just look at who's kind of behind this stuff. And it's not from the 60s where the hippy dippies and the people living poor lives, as environmentalists, kind of from the ground, who were leading a movement. The movement's being led by very wealthy, elite people, global governance bodies, major corporate interests that are using climate change not just as an environmental issue, but for, as you say, a pretext to centralize authority. And you frame climate as a planetary emergency. You make everybody fearful, and there's like a sense of moral imperative, and it's very easy in a situation like that to, justify these kind of top-down policies, whether it's carbon taxes or, as you say, restrictions on travel. In Canada, in some Calgary somewhere, you can't go in the forest up there. It's a $25,000, fine, because, that's the government just coming in with a very tight fist and trying to control people's energy use, agriculture, personal consumption, and kind of it normalizes these controls where people feel like, hey, we need to be protected from other people. So, mass surveillance, carbon tracking, all these things, smart meters, the digital IDs that we keep seeing coming up that are actually happening in some countries, I think in Europe. Right. And so just you have these models, these controversial assumptions that people who aren't earning a lot of money in the kind of environmental world don't buy, the ones who don't have a stake in it. And, they publicize these things, as you say, that are actually criticized by a lot of science and seen as unlikely, worst case projections. This is not going to happen. But the media puts it out like, this is what's happening. And we've seen again, John Kerry or the Al Gore, the people who say in 5 years, this is going to happen, in 10 years, that's going to happen. And they've been doing that for 40 years and they're never right. And after a while, people hopefully get skeptical and kind of wake up to what's going on. But the process itself.
Yeah. And one other thing I didn't really mention, but I think it's a factor, which is Back in 1960, I think it was 4 or 5, Lyndon Johnson said, "He who controls the weather will control the world." And the military has been working on this for decades, really. And there's these geoengineering, or they call it solar radiation management, like spraying
subject,
aluminum
absolutely.
and barium and strontium up into the atmosphere and other nanoparticles to reflect the sunlight because we have global warming, something like that. But that can be used in conjunction with ionospheric heaters that shoot literally millions of volts of electrical energy up into the ionosphere, and they can actually move heat domes to different areas and move bodies of air and storms around and create sort of catastrophic situations. I mean,
Sure.
This has been worked on for 80 years. They've developed capacities to do this. This is well documented, actually.
Right. No, a lot
And
of different countries can do it.
geoengineeringwatch.com. So, so we have to just be aware that, and then they can always use that and say, oh, another case of climate change. They always blame it on climate change. So,
and then this net zero idea that's come,
right.
I think that comes out of the World Economic Forum. They're always talking about these ESG frameworks. And this is with these big corporations, consolidating control for sustainability. It's like, oh, how nice of these big rich
You're right.
to be looking out for us little guys by taking control and
oh yeah, and then they fly around in their private jets to all these meetings and tell us we can never travel anywhere. I mean, they actually said at the World Economic Forum 2 years ago that in the near future, the average person will never fly. It'll only be for those certain people who are allowed to fly. Everybody else can have goggles, and you can go there virtually. But that's the vision.
Yep. Well, it's a lot of exaggeration. Obviously, a lot of claims to scare people into compliance. For me, it just undermines, trust, and it's diverting energy from genuine, real voluntary ecological stewardship that people can take part in, like by being vegan, for example, and many other ways too.
Well, yeah, and the thing is, what it is basically is a massive amount of deception. Right? A lot of deception. We saw it in the pandemic. We see it with climate change, and what that does is it divides society. Because some people will say, wait a minute, that's not true. And other people say, oh, it is true. And then you get everybody fighting. And in the meantime, they just divide and conquer. So it's really important for us somehow to learn to not be deceived. And I think that's the challenge, because it's very sophisticated means that are being used, and they weaponize the two main goals that we have now. One main goal is to get along with the tribe, to agree with everybody around us, and the other main goal is to do whatever the authorities say. The alpha male, like the tribal chief said, there's global warming, you don't go against him, right? These are very deep drives in us as human beings. They understand that, so they come along with these authority figures and they tell us this, and then they have the whole tribe saying it. And most people can't go against that. They won't go against the authority. They won't go against the tribe. And then they weaponize that and divide. And so we have to just understand that and remember our spiritual roots, that we are eternal consciousness and we can speak our truth, and we're much greater than this, and see our solidarity as spiritual beings. I think that's really the key. Veganism and spirituality together, and taking time to meditate. I mean, I'm lucky. I was a Zen Buddhist monk. I spent thousands of hours just getting in touch with my own mind. I was also lucky. I was born into a newspaper family. My father owned a whole chain of newspapers. So I learned not to trust the media. I learned growing up that you don't run articles that the advertisers won't like. I know in my bones things that most people don't know. So I'm trying to share these things to help people realize the media is completely controlled. We have to connect this inner guidance system that we have and not rely on outside authorities anymore. They're corrupt, and connect with our own inner wisdom. That's really the key. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful opportunity.
Well, thank you, Will. Again, thank you for challenging us to think critically and act consciously. So, and I also want to thank you guys, the viewers, everyone watching. Let's keep this conversation going. Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Please give this video a like, share it, and we're going to see you on the next one. Will, thank you again so much.
Thank you. Thanks, Jeff.